let's talk about race relations. No, not that kind though. Um, that's a terrible gag. Uh, but yeah, we're gonna talk about the races that exist in my campaign setting. I have an overview which has information from the SRD. At least the last time I looked it up, it was like a number higher than 0. Uh, goddamn, I'm good with math, aren't I? I have my timer. I'm looking at it. Until then, let's get going, shall we? Ah, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about stuff. So nothing that's on here should violate the SRD. I've tweaked some stuff that existed in the SRD, and I have uh, added my own sub races. So this should be pretty solid. The races available in my campaign world are three in number. You have dwarves, you have elves, and you have humans, which I am not done fleshing out yet. There are many nations and regions that they come from, because humans, as it turns out, are highly mutable pieces of detritus that will just sort of cling on to a place and learn how to survive there. And I am representing that as using the subrace system, even though it's really just regional differences. Not that it's not for any of the other races either. But I am throwing a monkey wrench in this. For those who would say, oh, 3 isn't enough, I want to be a gnome. First of all, no. No gnomes. 0 gnomes. No gnomes. And for those of you who want to be a dragonborn or a tiefling, I've got you covered, to an extent. It's a bit different in my world, but yes, dragonborn are there. So are half-orcs. So are tieflings, to an extent. And something that I'm working on, and we're gonna try to flesh out a little bit, because I'm not quite done with it, and I'd like to work on that a bit. We'll flesh these out, and then we'll start moving on to individual races thereafter, yeah? Okay. Until then, let's talk about where we are with what we have. Oop. Okay. So, dwarves. According to the SRD and my information here, which I don't believe I've altered all that much to this. I've cut out some things that didn't matter, like alignment and some fluff bits that, But generally speaking, dwarves are good with axes and hammers. They're good against poison. They're a little slower than your normal a little slower than the other races physically on their feet, but they're a little shorter too, so it's whatever. They're long-lived. They're good with stone, the history thereof, anyway. And they're proficient with tools of different varieties that are pretty much widespread crafting or trades throughout their lands, their society, their civilizations. Smithing, brewing, and masonry. Pretty classic. The difference comes down to the 3 main types of dwarves that you will run into, and I just realized I have not zoomed in enough. Here we go, this should be easier to see. The 3 main kinds of dwarves that you will run into are hold dwarves, plains dwarves, and sea dwarves. Hold dwarves are your pretty classic dwarf. They live in mountain holds, underground, basically where you would traditionally see dwarves being. The problem with that is that underground, there's a lot of weird stuff down there. So they get attacked by aberrants a lot, which, if you're not familiar with the concept of aberrants, they're weird creatures that shouldn't be, but are. Just think of all that Lovecraftian nonsense that all the kids are into these days. And that's it. That's what you got. Usually tentacles are involved. If you're lucky, anyway. Then you got your plains dwarves, and these guys are traitors. Not traitors, traitors. They basically, the whole dwarves realized other races exist, and we can't do well without what they have that we don't. So these guys are the ones who decided, hey, let's take our goods and we'll go trade them for other people's goods and come back. And eventually it basically resulted in them being a little, they're not as strong as whole dwarves are because there's not as much like raw physical, I'm going to lift this quarried stone above my head and throw it at this monster sort of thing going on. But what they do have is they are hardier and they can move faster. So they move at a speed normal, the normal speed, for lack of a better term. They move at 30 instead of 25 like normal dwarves do. They also get more hit points every level, just one, and they get an extra language because they move around a lot. It's also, I failed to mention this before, but for all the races, I took away the base race's dark vision. No race starts with dark vision anymore. In fact, there's no sub races that give dark vision either. All sub races give low light vision, which was taken out of 5th edition, but I'm sort of squeezing it in anyway because I like it. And I think dark vision in general is just a little too powerful to have right off the bat. I'm gonna have ways to get it back in feats, specializations, magic items, spells, that sort of thing will give dark vision. Which is fine. I think it's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing in general. Because it just turns dim light as if it were bright, but dark is still dark. And I think that's okay. So, old dwarves living underground, they're more used to dimmer conditions, so they see better in dim light. Plains dwarves don't have to deal with that so much, so they lost that in exchange for faster movement, being a little hardier over land, and they learned some languages along the way. Sea dwarves are a little bit weird, though. Sea dwarves are... well, they live on the seas. They're basically plains dwarves, but they're on the ocean. And part of that comes from another one of those experiments of the Dwarven Lords, the Dwarven Holds, is they said, hey, we need to expand, but we also need to control some waterways. That'll be good for getting goods out and about, because our caravans, they don't always do well. So they said, hey, let's control a waterway. So they found a mountain like sheared in half that's on the sea, and they stuck a hold in there. They sent out an expedition. They created a new hold. Everything was fine and dandy, but there's some weirdness about it. Some cultural weirdness about it. Obviously, your traditional dwarves don't really like the sea. They think it's weird and unnatural. But dwarves that are raised in the sea holds are a bit quicker. They have better reflexes. They're trained in in using ships of different kinds, depending on the purpose. So some are trained on big ships, some are trained on smaller ships, but all are trained how to use gosh darn rowboats, because you need to get from a ship outward. Otherwise, it's just not going to get you anywhere. But on top of that, in order to keep things sort of on the up and up, in order to make, well, I guess, life on a ship feasible, they've over time developed a system of training that's almost intrinsic to them now for their young, where all sea dwarves can use the mending cantrip without material components. This rope split, hold it together, and just magic happens. Now, the weird cultural bit that comes from this is the internal compass. And the internal compass is, well, you could read the ability. When they concentrate for a minute, they get to know a sort of general direction of where they were born. And the reason for this is one of the dwarf lords, the one who set up the first hold, as he was dying, he was like, "I want to keep my people safe from the sea. They're not in a good place," because he was terrified of the sea. The sea hold was doing fine. The dwarves were a little finicky, but they were doing fine. So he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna get a very powerful spell cast. It's gonna be a blessing. It's gonna be a blessing. I'm gonna keep my people safe, and I'm on my deathbed anyway, so I'll sacrifice my life to do it. It'll be my legacy. It'll keep them safe. Everything will be great." And that was to make it so that they would always know where home was. But a spell that powerful, so they wouldn't get lost in the sea. So he's like, I don't want them to, you know, not find their way home, because it's ocean's not the mountains. You can't dig through it. Once you're in there, you're in there. As far as he knew, he wasn't the brightest man. But you can't fuel magic that powerful that changes an entire people without more fuel than just the life of an old dwarf who's about to die. So, unbeknownst to him and the priest who helped him cast it, is that, and it's not represented here, but any sea dwarf that is not born at port, like if they're on a ship and they're born there, they're not born. They're delivered stillborn, and that this is gonna get real dark real fast, as though it hadn't already. That material comes into unlife. It creates a wraith of sorts that will haunt that ship forever until that ship is destroyed. There's nothing you can do. It will always be on that ship. Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing you can do. That's just what it is. So that's messed up. That is entirely messed up, and I feel bad for having come up with that. But hey, dwarf boats. Boats with dwarves on it. Elves, pretty much the same thing as your normal thing. Obviously, I got rid of the dark vision. Two of the three subraces have the low light vision variant of it, I believe. But yeah, otherwise they're fast. They have the keen sense, or their normal walking speed. They have the keen senses. Their dexterity is up, and this is where things get a little weird, because all of these are a little bit different. Yeah. So you have three species. The Exalted are up first, but I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way up on this one instead. So forgive my scrolling nonsense. In fact, I think I have to start in the middle. Nope. I don't know how best to approach this. Where do I start? I guess, like all stories, you start from the beginning. And in the beginning, the elves were a very primitive race. Just sort of there. They didn't do a lot. Their god didn't do a lot. In fact, he kind of just left. He got bored and just went off into the universe. Because elves generally aren't very interesting creatures. They're pretty happy to just hang about for their many, many centuries and just have a grand old time. But that generally changed when the Fae came along. Now, the Fae wanted to control our world, our campaign world, which is as yet unnamed, because it's almost a perfect match with the ley lines, the sort of veins of the world's energy for their realm. But ours is much smaller than theirs. So if they can come through in a ley line portal, or in a vertex portal, where the ley lines meet, I forgot what I named that, but it exists. Somewhere in my notes, somewhere in my many, many notes, it exists. So the Fae come through and they're like, hey, we can use this for much faster transport. Because this world is like 1/100th the size of ours, if not smaller. And they're like, hey, let's do that. So they come in, and the first thing they see is, yo, these elves are hanging out, because elves like to hang out in big old foresty areas and places where a lot of magic was running through. The ley lines and the points at which they met, perfect places for them, where they could sit around and do nothing and basically just be elves. Very, very exciting existence they have, huh? But then, the Fae said, "Hey, these are useful creatures. We can meld these. We can take them and we can shape them." So they did. They're like, "Let's turn these into our playthings, into our soldiers in our massive Fae wars, which are about to break out all over this world as we try to turn it into our subway. Not the sandwich joint, the transit system." And it didn't go so great, because eventually the elves got dang tired of being slaves, as creatures are wont to do. And as they lived for a very long time, they had longer to be slaves, and thus individuals got much tired of it. Much too fast for the Fae's liking. But they also became very skilled, and, well, some very surprising things happened. Because the Fae set up these massive fortresses around the portals to the Fae. The Fae Walk, I call it, which is their world. And what they do is, what they did is they took these elves, their favorite elves, the ones that they more or less trusted to not go all crazy, and they put them in this fortress where these special fruits grew. And it's like, these will keep you fed, these will keep you alive, they'll give you special powers, it'll be great. So these would eventually become the Exalted Elves. Over time, they'd eat this fruit, and it mutated them. So while your normal, quote-unquote, normal elf is basically a pointy-eared human, little slider, of build, these guys are weirdly monstrous in a way. They have no hair whatsoever, their ears are much longer and sharper, they have, like, their mouth is full of tiny, tiny sharp teeth, because that's all they ate was these fruit. So much like a fruit bat, that's sort of how their mouths redeveloped from this mutating, power fruit that the Fae were trying to use to control them. And they trained them to use halberds and longbows and flails to protect these fortresses. Basically all the stuff that they're like, yeah, this'll hurt people. And it also, it had a fantastic effect of making them almost Fae. So they gained, the ability to sometimes shrug off charms and the ability to be put to sleep magically. It also gave them the ability to trance, which, instead of sleeping, they just meditate. Whom, and there it goes. It's really, really quite interesting. I'm not making it sound that way, but it really is. Lastly, it also made them ageless. They can't die from growing old. In fact, they don't age at all. They have no upper limit. Unlike all the other elves who are like in the 700 to 800 range, some spectacular individuals are above that. But exalted elves don't die from old age. You have to kill them. That's just the way it is. Or, you can give them some sort of horrible disease. That works too. But back to the whole overthrowing the Fey princes thing. They contracted with natural spirits of the land and decided, hey, let's learn how to gain some powers. So the people who are guarding these exalted elves decided, hey, let's gain magic that any of us can use. And over time, they learned how to use each of them learned how to use a very basic spell from either the wizard or the druids. Which wizards are little more than, or druids are little more than divine or natural wizards anyway, as far as I'm concerned. And that's how that happened. On the flip side, you have the rock elves, who were never altered, because they were out in these rocky steppes. Basically, I think of them as Mongolians without horses. Because they are, I had intended to make them fast on their feet. I apparently neglected that. I will have to add that in later. But generally speaking, overall, they can't track them. They are so very, very good at moving across the land that they don't get found out. They've learned very specific ways of fighting. They can cast Blade Ward as, whatever. So they can conjure up magic shields. They can move faster. That's how I did it. At 3rd level, they gain the ability to cast Long Strider, which vastly improves their speed. And later on, they gain Pass Without a Trace, so they can't be tracked either. It's astounding. And they learned how to use shields and nets and tridents. That's just how combat in the steppes where they developed came to. And it's really hazy there all the time because of a combination of they have the sea on one side, and they have this distant, like, pyroclastic thing off in the distance. Nobody goes to it because it doesn't seem worth it. But it spews ash, so between the ash and the mists rolling off the ocean, it's pretty dark most of the time. And there's the wild elves. Wild elves are weird because they sort of flipped back and forth between the Feywilds or the Feywalk so much that they got mutated in a way entirely different from the Exalted Elves. So they have the same Fey origin ability. They have the same trance. They gain, but they have an almost magnetic personality. So they are naturally talented with, depending on the person, a different skill for charisma. So if some are better at intimidating people, some are better at diplomacy and all that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, they're good at talking to folks. But they can also twist this primal chaos energy to make things come out in their favor. So once per long rest, once per day, basically. I guess they can just sleep for 4 hours or trance for 4 hours. When they roll a d20, they can add an extra d6 to it. Or they can roll a d6. And if it's even, they'll gain an advantage, so they can re-roll that 20 and see if it's better. But if it's odd, they gain a disadvantage, so the second one takes a... You know how that works, probably. If you don't, advantage is you roll 2d20 and you take the highest. Disadvantage is you roll 2d20 and you take the lowest. So it's a crapshoot. The real trick comes from Wild Elf spellcasters, who, well, A few times per day, basically. They're able to buff a spell. They can take that wild energy and they can cram it into a spell, and it counts as being a spell slot higher for the casting. But it comes with a side effect. Now, it has a 50-50 chance of just behaving normally. So you roll a d12, if it's even, it's fine. But on an odd number, you look at this table, and this table does a lot of weird stuff. So it completely replaces the spell effect. If you were really banking on that that fireball spell being more powerful or what have you, you've made a mistake. Because 50-50 chance you might get something else entirely. Some of these are okay, some of them are really not okay, but a couple of them just are nothing. Like, you got this right here. Spell fails to activate, but the spell slot is not expended. Basically, it fizzles, but you don't lose the spell slot. Then you have the long casting version of plant growth, where the spell instantly does the long version of it. You won't even know what happens. You just spell, and then nothing happens. You're just like, oh, well, shite. Spell is gone. Nothing I can do about it. There's a butterfly shield, which I really appreciate. It gives temporary hit points to all allies in an area. A big area, too. There's another one of those crazy things where I decided, hey, let's give levels of fatigue, levels of exhaustion. I'll figure out which one it is eventually. I may have to actually read the SRD. Wouldn't that be fun? Which turns the spell into a little orb that you then get to throw as an action. Maybe it's as the thing. I don't know. Either way. Maybe I'd let them just do it instantly. It doesn't matter. But it deals with D4 levels of fatigue, which is madness. Utter madness. It can't kill, but it can ruin a guy's day. Bane is an effect which is basically anti-magic. Bane is anti-magic. It's a concept in this world. It's not just anti-magic. Anti-magic is known as the Bane. And I'll get more into that later because it gets into a lot of the world as I move forward. It's basically there's this entity, not entity. I also don't have it worked out particularly well. But there's a force in the universe, a physical law that says magic can't happen here. And against all rules of observation, it almost has it seemingly has like a will of its own. It behaves in certain ways that it probably shouldn't. And of course, the last effect is that the spell just explodes in light, and everybody in the area gets blinded and deafened, including you. So that's elves. That's the stats of elves. It's a brief history of elves. And we have humans. Humans, I'm not quite done with. I don't have names for any of the areas yet, but this is where we are. Humans are wildly variable. 2 scores go up by 1. Everybody gets a feat. This right here, this is my attempt to replace prestige classes from 3.5, and it's coming together. It'll come together better later, but for now, it's not really worth worrying about. Basically, it's a feat that lets you exchange your feats for specialty class features, essentially. Sort of a way of multiclassing without multiclassing. Because that stuff is annoying in this edition, and I don't quite understand it. Also, you might have noticed along the way that I have replaced common with trade. It's the same thing. It's just rose by any other name is probably not a lilac. But this is where things get weird. There's some main variations to humans. There's there's this big empire, really big empire, and in the core of the empire, people are trained in specific ways. Everybody has military training in both parts of the empire. In the less populated or the less trafficked regions, there's a lot of stuff going on. Everybody is trained just in different ways. In the core of the empire, metal is a lot more common. They're more willing to spend for citizens to learn how to fight. So they are taught how to use light armor, long swords, crossbows, light crossbows, of course. Let's not go crazy. And part of their military service is that they're taught a trade. So they learn a skill and a proficiency with a tool. And in the outer reaches of the empire, where the less civilized, quote unquote, parts of the empire, it's much the same. There's still requisite civil training. You're trained how to, except out there, you're trained how to use a pike and a crossbow. They can't afford armor in all the places, so civil mandate came down, no armor training. Sorry. But because they're not training with longswords, and pikes are a lot easier to deal with, lean down, stab, maybe do a little sweeping action. They have more time to learn trades and tool usage, so they get an extra tool instead of armor. Pretty sweet, at least as far as I'm concerned. Then you have people from uncivilized areas. These are maybe isolated towns or tribes from places that are just far out from any kingdom or the big empire. And more or less they learn any skill or trade that they need, and they're a bit more athletic because they gotta move through these wildlands a little better. There's not massive road structures going on, basically. No cities to speak of. The flip side of that is wastelanders, which are people from... They're basically outlanders, but from very, very inhospitable areas. Specifically, there's this, great salt and slate area, which is very, very inhospitable. Not a lot of people live there, but the ones that do have trained in survival and athletics to move around better, and they are almost all proficient with all because they need to break down little caves that have opened up in order to find safety from these salt storms, basically, these sandstorms that cut at the flesh. It's not a nice place, but the other flip side is they are rather hardier. They get extra con, and they get choose an ability score, like the other places. I've named these republics, even though they're only one of them is really. But it was easier because I don't have names yet. And in fact, some of these I'm probably going to flip around a little bit. But the end result is that... stop that. The end result is that there's one that's all, hey, we feel that we're better than everybody else. But they're a bit isolated as far as culture is concerned. They don't allow a lot of people in and out, but they do have a large mercantile structure. But part of this is that they teach trades like a boss. They only teach trades to an extent. They'll teach you how to use artisan's tools, one of any other type of tool, and basically you're almost expected to learn one of the main ways of two of the main ways of interacting with folks. There's like a islandy river sort of area where basically there's a lot of boats. That's about it. They can only choose from strength, dex, or con, but they get a lot of proficiencies with specific things. And that felt okay to me. I may alter it a bit, but I feel it's alright. Then there's the last one is basically a magic kingdom. It's a bubble kingdom There's one city. They're super, super insular. They don't allow things in or out for the most part. Means I think I had actually meant for this to be over there. Whatever. And their whole thing is they teach a lot of mages, and if you can't do magic, then you're still expected to do, you're still expected to sort of be an expert in a field of knowledge. Because you're basically the library of the world. Yeah. And everybody who's there is taught one of these two abilities. Either thaumaturgy or prestidigitation as a cantrip. Because magic! And this is where things get fun. I have introduced, because I didn't want to have them as individual races, because that's a terrible way of saying it, but I feel that when you have too many individual sapient races on a world, it starts to break down a little bit what the thematic cohesion is. That's a lot of big words for I don't think that it's a bad thing to do what I'm doing. I've taken a handful of other races and I've broken them down into sub-races, which can crop up in any of the other races as a sub-race. So Dragonborn can show up as dwarves or elves or humans. And instead of the subraces of those, they get Dragonborn subrace. The logic behind this, at least in the story of the world that I have thought of, oh, my back, is that, well, there's like this thing about dragons. Nobody's seen a real dragon in a long time, but every once in a while, weird stuff falls to the world from the moon. And when it does, weird dragon-like creatures come into existence. And I'll explain more about dragons in another video, probably. But, yeah, here we go. Oh, water. Oh, God. Oh, that's the good stuff. So, one of the things that happened one of these times is that spontaneously, the different races around the world started having children that were born with reptilian features. Including, elongated skulls and basically your dragonborn as you might see in the player's guide, player's handbook. And yeah, they don't get a lot going for them. They choose either strength or charisma to go up by 2. And unlike the basic dragonborn from the player's handbook, I decided that the breath weapon should be modular. So when you choose this subrace, you get a breath weapon. And you choose the shape of it, and you choose the damage type. And the shape can be a single shot. So you target one enemy with it within 60 feet. It can be a 5-foot wide, 30-foot long line, or a 15-foot cone. Now the line and the cone are from the player's handbook, but or the SRD. But the 60-foot single target is me, as is choosing the damage type. Because you should have choices as a player. You just should. But, and this goes into it a little bit. Choose it. You can't change it. You choose it at character creation, and that's it. Now the DC is 8 plus con plus proficiency, which is normal, and it's 2d6 damage, and it goes up and it scales as you go up. You can use it once per short rest, basically. a short or a long rest will do it. That's just the wording to make sure that it's not, it's a short rest, not a long rest. Oh, it's a long rest, not a short rest. Which some DMs I know would abuse. But I did a long rest! I should have it back! It says you only get it back after a short rest. Ugh. Pedantic. Also, they gain damage resistance, depending on the type of the breath weapon. So, my orcs are different. Long ago, well, maybe not terribly long ago, probably about 30 years back from time of campaign, 30, 40 years, orcs got really rowdy. And orcs are really big. Let me put that down instead of fiddling with it and making dumb noises. Orcs came around and they started wrecking all the things. Busting everybody's good time, pissing in everybody's Cheerios, taking part in everybody's parades even though they did not have a permit for their float. Also, sacking ports, raping villages, pillaging women, that sort of thing. And, yeah, it's not great. So what everybody did, everybody who was being attacked by orcs decided, hey, instead of going to war with these really big, really strong creatures, let's go into the core of their territory and kill every female orc in strike teams. And they did. They killed every female orc. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, asterisk, definitely probably not a few still around that the orcs just don't know about. And also, shut up, I have definitely not been watching too much Mass Effect on the interwebs. Or playing it. Definitely not been playing it. I may have been playing a bunch of Mass Effect. Krogans I'm talking about. But, unlike that nonsense, orcs, the males that were still around, obviously not pleased with this, started turning against each other and fighting everybody, and a lot of them died. Oh, gassy. Gassy, gassy, gassy. So they fight everybody, and they say, yo, here's the thing. We're all dying. So the more clever of them decided to strike out on their own, or in small groups, and just sort of live off the land. And the stronger of them decided, hey, I'm going to live my life the way I have been, and I'm going to kill everything that tries to kill me until I fail. So obviously only the strongest and the most clever of orcs survived this ordeal. It took about a decade for the population to dwindle significantly. But, in the meantime, it was discovered that orcs could interbreed with any race. Unlike your common setting, where humans are inexplicably the ones who can interbreed with everybody, it's the orc. And the orc, the clever ones, decided, hey, how about when we come through a town, we decide to ply our trade in exchange for, a night stay, or, we'll stay for a fortnight or whatever. We'll stay until, it's confirmed that the deed is done. Basically until, they offered to sire children, strong children, in exchange for a place to stay while they were wandering. And food and the ability to go out and, I don't know, kick over cows. I don't know what orcs do with their spare time. That's their business. And that's how the proliferation of half-orcs throughout every society started happening. Crazy stuff. But, fortunately, these half-orcs are generally either stronger or just hardier than their parent race. Well, not the orc race, but the other parents' race. Their maternal race. They also benefit from the eyesight of their father race, their paternal race, so they get the low light vision. They are also kind of scary to look at because they got larger teeth going on. Not quite the tusks of a proper orc, but very large canines, basically. So they're very intimidating. And otherwise, they get to choose one of 3 abilities, which are sort of endemic to the orc. This is where they differ from the orcs of the player's handbook, or the half orcs of the player's handbook, is they can choose either one of these 3 things. They can, as a bonus action, they can move their speed towards a hostile creature they can see. That's sort of an orc monster thing. They have basically the ability to get brought down to 0, but they can just choose to not drop. They go down to 1 hit point instead of 0. They can do that once per rest. Long rest, specifically. Basically, you think you took him down. Nope, JK, bro. And the other one is, when you crit extra hard, which is pretty solid. The Jotun, we'll come back to, because I'm not quite done with them, and I think that's how we'll cap this section of reviewing what I've done. Last of all, I guess not last of all, because we're going back to Jotun, is the Tiefling. The Tiefling is very different in this world from the Player's Handbook. In the Player's Handbook, they're very... They look like your classic devil. They got the red skin, the horns, the tail, the cloven feet, or whatever. That's not the case in this world. It's also not a matter of breeding either, with devils or demons or what have you, because demons are different in this world. Demons in this world, I'm sorry if some other video I've explained this already, demons in this world are created from a substance known as the Inferno. And the Inferno is basically a living fire that people sometimes use it as an ingredient, as a shortcut for life. And it creates demons, which are sort of, they're supposed to be single-use servants. You call them into existence, they do their thing, and then they happily pop out. Sometimes, though, they don't go back. For one reason or another. Either their instructions cannot be completed, or, very rarely, a demon will decide that it wants to do something different with its life. And these demons will sort of do their instruction, but they'll spend their time doing whatever they want else. And usually that involves trying to become a mortal. And these guys are weird. They're always a little creepy, and they typically are created in the appearance of the race that they're trying to be. But there's always something off about them. Like their face isn't right, or their arms are too long. It's not there. You can always tell that they're not the race that they're supposed to be. And some of them actualize their being. They actually realize what they want out of life, and they become mortal. And it's crazy. I wish I could do that. I wish I could just decide what I wanted to be and then be it. I made myself sad just now. Oh well. In any case, when they succeed, they basically erupt in flames, and their body solidifies and becomes a little bit more like the race that they are emulating. But there's always something off about them. And that something is, you can always tell when a tiefling is a tiefling. Is the gist of it. There's just something wrong about how they exist. Features aren't right. But otherwise you can tell that it's an elven tiefling, or a dwarven tiefling, or a human tiefling. But, like, maybe their eyes just don't have irises, or they speak really weird. Their skin isn't the right tone. Some of them literally just you look at them and you go, I don't know about that guy. They could look perfectly normal, and you're just like, nah. And that's a 3.5 ism. Uh, they centralized or they standardized the tiefling in 4th edition, which I get when you want to use something regularly as a race, you want to do that. But I think it takes some of the customization out of what it means to be a tiefling. And it was always assumed that tieflings were of human and like demon or devil heritage, but I really like the idea of a creature decides to become mortal and becomes mortal. It succeeds, but it just doesn't get the features quite right. And part of this comes in that they get low light because when they explode in Inferno and become mortal, the fire is just in their eyes. They can see dim light. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain it. I just thought it was neat. They get fire resistance because of the whole Inferno thing, and they get the ability to do the thaumaturgy cantrip, and basically they're almost the exact same as the tiefling from Player's Handbook or the SRD, but I get to put them as a subrace for everybody. Cut down on my core races to keep things nice and clean, but still have variety because, as I said earlier, players should have choices. Say it with me now. Players should have choices. Now, here's the weird one. This is something I'm coming up with because I don't want to borrow too heavily from existing things, from existing features, from existing information from the SRD. So I'm making my own subrace here, my own universal subrace, and I'm trying to explain to myself how it happens. But my cosmology of my world is not quite linking with this. Basically, what it comes down to is giants are very powerful creatures, almost extinct at this stage. Giants are so rare that when you see one, it's like seeing a myth. It's like in this world, in the real world, in our world, if you saw a 30-foot green man trying to sell you peas, you'd be like, whoa, that's wild. Same thing here. The difference is that the most powerful of these giants, who are now dead because of an ancient giant thing that happened, the specifics are lost to history. But basically, there was a war between tribes, and they bred a super weapon out of their own people, and it went badly. So they decided to scrap the project, and part of that was destroying its soul. But because it had become so powerful, it didn't actually destroying the soul only shattered it. So every little piece, again, I may have been watching a lot of Dark Souls. These souls sometimes get reincarnated, these fragments of souls sometimes get reincarnated into these other races, and with it comes a few perks. First of all, they're much bigger than normal for their race. Much bigger. And part of that comes from the powerful build, where that allows them to lift things as though they were large. Another thing is the hulking hurler ability. They remember from their time as giants how to do this thing where they just throw stuff. But because of their bodies, they can only do it so much. So what they've gained is the natural and almost supernatural ability to throw like roughly 5-pound stones really large distances as a weapon that they are eventually become proficient in if they do it long enough. On top of that, rather than every other subrace, which gets an ability score increase, these guys have their cap on ability scores lifted from 20 to 22. So it's not that they are necessarily stronger or smarter or faster than other races, than other people, but they have more growth that they can go through. And there's also going to be one last benefit, which I'm trying to nail down, and it's going to be based around the sort of Gigant, these super weapons, that they had been in their original life. The trick is, I don't know what I'm doing. So that's what we're going to tackle here. And holy cow, I've been talking for an hour. Oh my goodness. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a bite of this coffee Pop-Tart. Ugh. It smells terrible. And it tastes worse. Nowhere near as bad as when it's warm. But still. Coffee is disgusting. I don't get how people can eat it. Or drink it. Consume it in any way. Ugh. Oh, that's gross. Anyway, at least it's mostly chocolate in the Pop-Tart. But coffee is damn powerful. Alright. So, let's do what I like doing, and let's make a list. I like lists. Lists make the world fall in line. He says, gesturing along a flat plane as though you can see it. So, let's start our process, our creation process, by listing the type of giants that there are. Now, these are going to come around in mostly elemental fashion. We're going to have Storm. Could have been a Storm Gigant. Gigant, which is going to be electricity. I guess technically they've renamed it to lightning. Keep it all fantasy. Lightning damage. You've got your fire gigants, which are obviously fire. You got your frost, which is clearly, also fire. No, that's a little joke. Or is it? No, it's cold. You're also going to have the Stone Giants made one. And they channeled the ability of rocks to smash together to make loud noises. Oh. I still want to try and fit in two more. If you might be saying, hey, dummy, isn't the common link of giants, or the common structure of giants from least to most powerful, hill, stone, fire, frost, other, cloud, uh, storm, stone and fire may be mixed up, either way. But still, isn't that the hierarchy? Aren't those the 6 kinds of giants? Yes! Again, in your standard setting, in your basic D&D, in your monster manualiness, in your Forgotten Realms, in your Greyhawk, that is accurate. I'm doing things a little different. At least I'm trying. Hopefully I'll remember all of this, and hopefully my notes are in order. They aren't. But I would like to believe. I want to believe that this is a thing I can do. So you have your storm, which are lightning giants. You have your fire giants, your frost giants, your stone giants. I also want to have the here's where things are going to get weird. Okay. So we're going to have what's known as the deep giant. Or rather the deep gigant. There are deep giants. They're just very rare because there's A, most of the giants are dead, and B, these ones were rare in the first place. Because there's not a lot of big spaces for them to exist where they are, which is underground. And these guys channel the power of positive thinking, which is rather to say necrotic damage. I don't know about that. I want to have necrotic and radiant in there as sort of a counterpoint to all of this nonsense. But at the same time, this general spread doesn't work with the cosmology of my world, which the world itself, the physical world, is made up of 3 elements. Technically, the physical world is made up of the element of earth, which is itself made up of 3 elements. Water, air, or wind, however you want to do it. Same thing. Most sages agree anyway. Or fire. Fire, water, air. When combined in different amounts, these create different kinds of earth. Sand, sand, magma, solid stone, sludge, mud, that sort of thing. Swampy areas. Oh. But, and I want the giants to be these primordial things that existed in the beginning of the world, the beginning of the physical world. Which means I'm gonna have to scrap a lot of this. Like this nerd, and in fact, both of these nerds. And lastly, this nerd also has to go. In fact, the fire is the only one that can stick around. Because we're going to have air and water. And I'll rearrange that so that it's alphabetical. Ooh, alphabetizing! Later. The question becomes, what on earth elements do we associate with these? Fire is fire. I suppose with air we can do thunder damage. But what do you do with water? I mean, I suppose you could say cold, because water is frequently used as a coolant. But I don't know if that necessarily works. I'm trying to think through all of the different elements of damage. And there's really nothing besides cold that would work there. Unless I took away elemental component from this. At least in general. I wanted them to have like a rage that gave them a power of an element. Like an ability that channels and allows them to deal elemental damage with like unarmed strikes, or otherwise modifies elemental damage that they do if it's of this particular type that matches them. Because while, say it with me, players should have choices, you also have to keep things thematically coherent. Which is where I'm starting to run into an issue. Because I want to do all the cool things, but I also can't explain all the cool things that I want to do in a way that makes sense in the world without changing how the world works, which changes histories of species. So I have this whole flowchart of things that goes wrong because I wanted to do something totally rad. And as the Dwarven God taught us, doing totally rad stuff doesn't always work out well for you. So I'm just going to lean back for a moment, and I'm going to think out loud. Hopefully the microphone can pick me up. Oh, I want to make these guys something cool. What that cool thing is, I have no gosh darn clue. Huh. I mean, without getting entirely too metaphysical about it, I don't know if there's anything that I can hard code into the rules without it getting really weird. Uh, you know what'll help me think? Nelly's Ride With Me. Now, because of YouTube's copyright nonsense, I can hear this, but you can't. Where they at? Where they at? Where they at? You wanna go ride with me? Seven of the suns, you will see. And why must I be this way? I don't know the song very well, but I damn love it. Hey, it must be the money. God, was that white enough for you? I can take on, she could be 18 with the attitude, 19, kinda snotty, acting real rude. Oh. Yeah, this is the problem I keep running into, and I swear at one time, while I was falling asleep, I came up with the perfect solution for this. But I was falling asleep, so I didn't write it down. I figured I'd remember it, and then I didn't. So that's if you're doing campaign creation, or if you're doing any sort of creative thing, keep a dang notebook handy just to write it down real quick. Because if you have a neat idea and you think, oh, I'll remember that, that's a neat idea, you're gonna forget. My main problem with this sub race is that I don't feel that the abilities that it has are strong enough on its own. I feel that it needs one more ability, but I just can't suss out what that ability is or should be. Hey, must be the money! I'm sorry, Nelly. Usually you work for me, but it's just not happening right now. You know, I hear Shaggy has a new album. Is there anything good on? Oh, I've heard one thing. I just can't, for the life of me, find it. Maybe through this link. Yeah, you got Seasons. Oh, Seasons is good. I've heard Seasons. God damn, Shaggy's a goddamn genius. I love him. It's great. And the specific sort of Gigant that I want to make, because there are going to be Gigants eventually. Got to believe that. Is that I want them to later be able to players to later be able to build on these abilities, these racial abilities, using a feat. I like every race is every race or sub race is probably going to have the universal sub races definitely are going to have a feat that sort of gives them another thing, like or builds them out. Like the half orcs are going to have a feat that a feat available. Oh God, the sneezing. That's in your ears now. If you have headphones on, I am so sorry. Oh, and I can't blow my nose either, really, because that'll be in your ears too. In fact, give me a second. I'm gonna blow my nose. Okay, okay, that feels a lot better. Woo! Words. Also, glass of water. What are we doing? Right. So, and like, there's gonna be something for Dragonborn to build upon their breath weapon by like being able to alter the shape of it, and how many times they can use it per rest, basically. That's the concept anyway, and I really hope I can follow through on it. But I'm not as talented as I'd like to think I am, which is a problem for me in general. Hmm. Gonna be real honest with you. I am stumped. I am more stumped than I thought I would be at the very least. Um, and now I'm trying to find a playlist to have in my head that will help me think. Here we go. We'll just put on my mix from you, which of course is gonna start with Shiny from Moana because that's just where my head is at, I guess. Happy as a clam, 'cause I'm beautiful, baby. I'm actually thinking maybe I'm going to go back to the way I had things with the Giants. To an extent. I think that it makes more sense for them as like original beings of this physical world to have themselves come forth from different sort of elemental combinations of their own. Like storm is more air than the rest. Fire is obviously more fire. Frost is I don't know, a lot of water and wind. Stone is probably a much more straightforward combination. A lot of them came together. And we are going to get rid of the deep giant. I don't like him anymore. Get out of here. But I still do not know what to do with this. Now, these are sort of the normals, well, quote unquote normal things. Swinging like you used to, man. Uh, what am I gonna do with you? I might change Thunder from the Stone Giants to something else. In fact, I might change the Stone Giants into something else. In fact, if we think about this reasonably, through the combination of elements, we've got raw fire, or probably fire and water, probably air and air and fire up here, air and water here. That's your normal combos. That's your three, like, if you draw I can't do it right now. It's not something I can do in this program really. But if you have sort of a circular area, Remedy, you know what? I got an idea. I got an idea. I've got an idea. Here we go. Got this open. So if we take like a circular area, drawing this with my mouse, please be kind, and we put, you know, water down here, yellow for air, it's up here. Why am I doing this? They have sort of an outline here. You got, what are you doing? Stop it. You got water. You got, these are going to be all sorts of off. Don't take the sizes to be important. Just the visualization is what matters here. Position, not so much. So you got these nerds. In fact, let's make you a little easier to see. Yeah, that looks better on the capture. Yeah, it definitely looks better on the capture in the dark orange. Or the dull yellow. Deep yellow? Anyway. So if we have if over here we have, oh lord, too big, too big. Why is this so large? We have frost. Come on. Really? Doing this to me? Frost here. Like, let's upsize you. Why not? Alright. We got frost. Frost is a combination of wind and air. Wind and air, Jesus. Your storm, your lightning. That's fire and wind to me, it says. And up here we have if land reasonably, if magma reasonably comes from a combination of water hitting, I guess that's lava, not magma, but cooling lands. You know how islands work, right? Let's go with that. If you don't know how islands work, look up how islands work. Yeah, these are your fire. In fact, we might rename them to lava. These are your lava giants. And in here, you've got stone giants. These are actually the weakest ones because they're deep in. They're too balanced to get a lot of power out of it. By being on the fringes, the other giants can sort of trade on the power that the elements hold, but in the middle, it's just physicality. So stone giants are just really big stone-like giants. They don't have a lot of power going for them, but I found the seam. I found the seam. Where are we? Where is my where's my mouse? M2 monitor setup. Oh, I'm sorry, Bruno Mars. You cannot be on right now. What's this? Toto, Africa, yes. Okay, so we have our visual now. It's bad, and I'll draw up a better one later, maybe. That's the best I could do on such short notice. Uh, with this is the aha moment. The physicality of the world means that they have the ability to break it down, which allows them to deal. I don't remember if it's acid in the actual system. Let me check. But acid, corrosive, basically. Where did I put the SRD? Here it is. Waiting here for you. Acid, yes. With physicality comes the concept that you can break things down. Wyatt, I like Dark Souls. Go away. The idea that with the physical world manifesting comes the concept of the physical world breaking apart. I like. I like it. Quiet. Company. They were right. The Serengeti. I have to turn this music off. There, the headphones are down. I can't do it. I'm gonna sing, and that's it. So these are the elements involved with these guys. Itchy throat. Gotta keep it lubricated. And what I want to do with this is I want to create an ability where when they are struck with one of these elements, whichever one that they are from, so like you'd be your history, your past life, your very soul is from one of these sorts of giants. And with that comes a perk of when you are struck with that sort of matching elemental damage, you will gain a buff of sorts. I know I'm getting a little video gamey with it, but I think if you disguise it in all the right trappings, it works okay. And that's one thing that 4th edition didn't do very well. It did not disguise the trappings of a game all that well. Everything was just slots of abilities. Everything was so samey. Like, there were differences in the classes, but all in all, it was the same thing. It was all the same. And that was the problem with 4th edition. It wasn't terrible, it was just kinda boring. Also, for people like me who don't speak very well most of the time, role-playing can be hard. And having, abilities designed to circumvent that, just be like, I have math on my side, therefore my check succeeds, because I have these feats, and this, spell is really, really useful for people like me. I've gotten better over the years, but I'm still a social idiot. I'm a social idiot. I don't understand how your human emotions work. And it shows. It shows frequently. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take our newly, partially, not quite yet minted concept here, and we're going to build on it. We're going to take this and we're going to say, well, first of all, we're going to save. Let's save our progress, because I don't want to lose it. And I might expand on the sub races of what the Jotun can be later. But again, much like with core races, I think it's fine to trim the fat. I think it's fine that there's not that there's only 3 core races as opposed to what, 8? I think that's fine. As long as you mix it up with the sub races enough, I think you get the same bang for your buck. Just like I don't think there needs to be 6, 7 kinds of giants. I think 4 is fine. Especially if they're going to be so rare in the world, I think it's okay. That said, say it with me now, players should have choices. I may revisit this to put in that necrotic and the radiant and just have one for each of the different types and just explain how these different types of giants came into existence. Because it's fun. It's fun to figure it out. It's a logic puzzle where the puzzle and the logic that you're trying to beat is your own. You're trying to outthink yourself. That's the beauty of creating game worlds, and maybe I'm just some kind of crazy idiot for thinking that way, but I like it. I really, really do. Sorry, I keep stopping mid sentence to or statement to stretch my back out and get a sip of water. But yeah, it's fine. So I'm going to save that, and we're going to actually go down to the bottom here. I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to go down to the bottom so that I can have some free space to work, where nothing gets in my way. Yeah, in fact, we'll go a few paragraphs down. Now, while I'm working with this, I'm actually going to leave it over here, because why not? It'll make formatting easier later. So, how do we want to figure this out? In fact, let me just, there we go. Now I can only see what I'm working with, and I will be able to work easier with this focus. Or I'm procrastinating by fiddling with my formatting. Either way, it's fine. I believe in me. Alright, so, Giant Reborn. Let's create another flowchart down here. Not a flowchart, but a list. Because I like them. So, what does this list say for us? We want it to be choose type. We want it to be uh, effect when hit with type do thing. What's the thing that we want to do? Do we want it to be an attack? I don't want it to be an attack. I think that the Dragonborn has that covered. Uh, if you want elemental attacks, the Dragonborn has that on lock. I'm thinking I would prefer this to be a buff, like a self buff sort of thing. But I also kind of want it to be expendable, like you can dispel it to do a thing. Or maybe we can have multiple effects with it. That'd be pretty solid. If we have it so that when you're hit with the element, you can choose to do one of two things with it, that'd be solid. I don't think healing. Healing is. No. No. No to healing. I think that would make them entirely too. Is sustainable the right word? I think that they're already probably a favored choice, like, just with some of what I've chosen for them, despite the fact that I don't feel they're powerful enough. When hit with a type, does a thing. What is the thing that we want to have happen? Well, it's going to be different for each type. And if I want to have it be two options, it would have to be, I would have to come up with 6 items. And I'm kind of lazy, so I don't want to come up with 6 items. Instead, I think I'm going to come up with, 8 items. Because I don't know how math works. Because there's 4 of them, not 3. What to do, what to do. I don't know. I just do not know. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to, again, copy and paste some lines. Copy, paste. What on earth are you doing? There we go. In fact, you know what? Screw it. We'll do it. We'll come up with 2 separate things for each of them. Let's start by coming up with one, but let's try to come up with a second. So, when hit with lightning damage, what should a Storm Gigant or Storm Jotun do? I imagine, obviously, because I'm not very imaginative, I look back at my thing, which you can't see. It's air and fire, which is part of why I want to do 2. Basically, one focusing on either element that they are a part of. Because we have air and fire and water. Because you're not fire gigant, you are a lava gigant. Lava. And we have the frost gigant, which is wind and water. And then we have the stone, which is all 3 sort of coming into a balance. Which means I would need to decide to either do 1 or 3, I would imagine. Probably just the 1. Maybe 3. But I feel that the Stone Gigant's abilities, regardless, should be weaker than the rest. Just because the Stone Gigants are the weakest of all the different kinds. There were just more of them back in the day. So where does that leave us? Well, let's say that when struck with lightning damage, the Storm Gigant can choose to gain a Let's think through sort of classic buffs. Now, the thematic constant with lightning is that it's fast, makes things go. It's electricity. Electricity. So typically when hit with that, things would usually move faster in the sort of games where something is hit by electricity, they get supercharged, right? Let's touch on that because, these sort of touchstones help. They do. They really do. So let's say that they can choose to gain haste. And we'll come up with flip sides of this because otherwise this would be way too powerful. Like maybe they can only benefit from it once per long rest. Or maybe it deals them levels of fatigue. Maybe it deals damage to them afterwards. Maybe it delays the damage. Or they're not resistant to the damage type. At least as I have them written. They just also gain a buff. Which I think is actually a pretty good trade-off. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that's actually a pretty good trade-off. So, you are hasted. Fire giants Fire Geigen, Fire Jotun, Fire, 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 Lava. When struck with fire, what happens to them? Well, aside from burning like everything else does, let's say it makes them stronger. Harder, better, faster, stronger. So what is that spell called, SRD? You change the name of it. Is it enhanced ability? Because it used to be 6 different spells, and now it's just 1. Yeah, like a different buff from one spell. It's enhance ability, and it gives you one of the different buffs. Sort of a video gamey thing, but that's all right. Because again, cutting the fat is okay as long as all the options are still there in some form or another. I think it works out just fine. You don't need different levels of cure spells if your cure spell, your one cure spell, scales with the different levels of spell slots that you use. That's just fine. That way you can prepare the one spell and use higher level spell slots. That was gosh darn ingenious. So, where does that end up with us at? Besides having spent 40 minutes writing down like 8 words, uh, it leaves us with it does enhance strength. Hold, we will say I don't want to do the enhanced ability for all because that's a bit of a cop out, and also storm giants get storm jotun get haste. So let's mix it up. Let's keep it moving. They see me rolling. They hatin'. They try to catch me riding dirty. In fact, let me just turn off this rather than just take my head. Oh, real big fish is on. Oh no. Where did I put? Oh, did I close my SRD? Gosh darn it. Alright, where is my SRD? Here we go. Oh, 5.1, not 1.5. Okay. That makes sense. That makes more sense, actually. Alright, let's look at our spells. Let's look at the spell. Obviously, I'm gonna try and recreate some spells that aren't in the SRD, but make them a little more lush, if you know what I'm saying. I'm trying to only show you information from the SRD because I'm pretty sure I can do that without Wizards of the Coast jumping down my throat. Which is very rough right now, as I've been talking for hours. Alright, so I'm flipping through spells here, and I'm not necessarily seeing something that I'm really digging on for the cold. You know what? I think what we're gonna do here is that it will give you shield. Yeah, that's all right. And we're gonna play with how long the duration is on these, obviously. Because one round shield when you get hit by cold damage doesn't do you a lot of good, especially if you're in one-on-one combat. So we need to have the duration be dependent on an ability score or how much damage you take, to like a minimum of one, or to a minimum of an ability score, or to a minimum of probably a minimum of one, because otherwise we're just cluttering things up. All right, now that I'm in the right window, scrolling will drive you mad, drive you insane. Um, Let me just skim through here. And of course, feel free to delve deep into the comments to give me suggestions on what sort of buff should be gained from these. Maybe if I had a little more time in this individual video, I would just come up with raw abilities for them to gain. And in fact, I may just do so. Because I'm probably going to revisit each of these subraces in their own section. Or at least I'll revisit the subraces to flesh out their information, give them fluff, write it down, and you'll be there with me with that. Just not right now. And when I do that, I'm going to take another look at the crunchy rules, and I'm going to tweak them. But until then, I don't really know what I'm doing. I will try, I will always try, but I don't know. So I'm looking to spells for inspiration. And part of that is me staring at my second monitor while you look at the same exact thing that you've been looking at. I apologize for this to an extent. Huh. Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything I want to do. There's just not anything in here that I'm looking at that I like for this purpose. So, obviously, I am going to have to come up with at least one thing. And what should that one thing be? Well, to be real honest with you, not super sure. Since it is the stone giant, uh, let's go through our logic for each of these different giant types. Storm giant gets hit with lightning, juices up the body, gets super fast. I believe haste lets you take an extra action. Oh, rolled past it. Come on, SRD. Lemeno, G, B to H. Yeah, okay, here we go. Haste. They gain, speed is doubled, gains 2 to AC, has advantage on dexterity. Holy cow, I forgot how good haste was. Additional action on each of its turns can only be used to take the attack action. One weapon attack only. Okay, that's not great, but it's okay. The other parts of the buff, the move faster and you're harder to hit, that's the good stuff. I thought it was just an action. And actually it is for the most part. Dash, disengage, hide, or use an object. Yeah. And it comes with the downside of once it wears off, you're slow for a turn. You can't take any actions that turn. Okay, that's fine. As for enhanced strength, the idea is that you hit it with fire and the body goes and floods with fire energy and it just sort of starts pumping muscles better, gooder, harder, better, faster, stronger. That don't kill me can only make me stronger. I need you to hurry up now because I can't wait much longer. Something. I don't know. I passed it. Enhance ability. Is that all it does? Gains advantage on strength checks and their carrying capacity doubles? That is super not comparable to haste. Holy cow! That's not even comparable to shield, which my concept of is that when hit with cold damage, their soul reacts and causes that cold to create a shell of ice that enhances their AC for just a moment. Wow, enhance ability sucks now. That's crazy. At least full strength sucks. Ooh, no sir, that's not gonna work. No, no, no. That is not good. Huh, something's making noises in my room. That's not good. It's behind my monitor, which is super not good because that's a wall leading into a crawl space. Oh well, probably a snake that wants to eat my brains. Snakes don't eat brains, not usually. The fun ones do. Wow. Okay, so we lost this one because not doing that. Holy cow, we're not doing that. Huh. Now I gotta come up with 2. Herm. Herm. Herby derby derb. Making noises with my mouth. Help me think. You know, I'm at a complete loss at this point. I thought this was going to be real solid. In fact, I think I can't even use haste or shield because I cannot reasonably find anything that balances between them. I mean, shield and haste is sort of shield as written. It gives you bonus AC for a very short while. It's more than haste, but it's not on par with haste. Haste is strong. Haste is real strong, and I cannot give that to them. Not fresh off the sheet. I really hate to have wasted an entire hour, but I am at a loss. I'm going to have to revisit these guys. I just am. I don't know where I'm going with this. I have completely lost track of what I'm doing. It's crazy. Is like is Jotun even worth doing? Like obviously it is. I wouldn't have spent this much time on it if I didn't feel it had somewhere to go. But is this ability necessary? They already have an attack ability. They have a powerful build. They have a utility, they have an attack, and they have a higher cap than other races. I'm going to leave these notes at the very bottom of this document because what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to leave this ability and I'm going to turn it into a feat. Much like I said how there would be like a feat for the orcs where they get to choose another one of these abilities. The Dragonborn can change the shape of their breath or whatever, and I'll come up with something for the Tiefling. But as it stands, this is going nowhere. And I've been trying to force it on the predilection. That's the wrong word. On the conceit. That's a better word. On the conceit that this isn't powerful enough on its own. But not all races and not all sub-races are necessarily equal. And that's okay as well. Because while it takes longer for the Jotun to get moving, this higher natural cap of abilities is a very, very powerful ability to have. And the fact that they can almost always find something nearby to use as a ranged weapon, very short ranged weapon, but a ranged weapon nonetheless, that they eventually are considered proficient with, and thus get a bonus on their attacks, I think that's okay. I really do. I'm feeling better about this as it is. I would still like to maybe put in that they have to choose what kind they were, but I feel that as part of the feat, that might work as well. That when they gain the feat, they basically have a dream that of that past life that awakens that part of their soul. Like the soul has already strengthened the body, but now with that feat, it will come to life and start giving them power. And I think that'll work better, and I'll get to do a little more wackiness with that. I'm still probably going to revisit this to touch upon and maybe give them something else. Because as it stands, I don't feel that they're as powerful even as the half-orc, which isn't super powerful in and of itself, or the Dragonborn, or it's okay. I just feel like I could do more with it, you know? Oh well. Anyway, holy cow, I spent a lot of time doing literally, I guess not literally, figuratively nothing. Not figuratively. Essentially nothing. But that's the way it works. Sometimes you spend 2 hours staring at words on the page and going, does this work? How can I make this work? This doesn't work. Crap, I just wasted 2 hours. It also doesn't help that I spent the first hour explaining my previous work to you. But hey, that's good because maybe I don't know what order these videos are going up in, but you'll be able to see my thought process one way or the other and hopefully find the information that I'm chattering on about. And I won't have to keep repeating it all. In any case, oh goodness, I need to go do something else for a little bit because my throat wants to claw its way out of my throat. Later, internet. You stay classy, okay?